Councillor Eugenie Harvey, the next 6 months are going to be really vital for the people of Harlow. And so what do you see as your role in respect of your role in Harlow Council?
Thank you, Michael, and it's very nice to be here, and it's very nice to be here with my colleague, Councillor Johnson. Thank you for having us and giving us this opportunity. Yes, the next 6 months are going to be hugely important for Harlow, for the world, but, you know, let's focus on Harlow for now. You know, it's no secret we're seeing an increase in infections, and we're coming into the winter season. So those things combined, I guess, alongside the risk of a certain fatigue amongst the public in relation to restrictions and lockdowns, which might mean that it's more difficult to get the same levels of compliance that we had in the first lockdown, when it was all sort of a bit more of a novelty. I think that means the next 6 months are going to be really important for us as individuals, but as a council, clearly we have a very important role to play, supporting residents, supporting businesses, and being an interface with the many bodies, for example, the County Council and Public Health, and the many players that are part of the ecosystem that is supporting the country and our town at this critical moment. So we are, you know, looking to our residents, looking to our businesses, and looking outward to the agencies that are giving us the support, and trying to be the conduit for that support coming in as effectively as possible.
Is this moral support, or is it more than that? What does support mean, or is it just an abstract emotional term? It's a very practical term. You know, we've got the community hub, which was vital in the first lockdown, ready to gear up, I'm assured. You know, we are ready to have that fully operational once again. And it's a daily watch at the moment as to when that kicks back into action. And that community hub, you know, that they took 60,000 calls in the, I don't know, what was it, 4 months of the extensive lockdown, and, you know, worked with the agencies, which we're so fortunate to have in Harlow, a wonderful network of voluntary sector organisations, but they really worked together to support particularly people who were isolating and more vulnerable communities, people who couldn't get out, people who were too frightened to get out, people, well, we weren't able to get out. So that practical support is absolutely pivotal and is very much in place for when we, you know, when we get to the, you know, likely scenario that we have more stringent restrictions. And I think the key thing will be when our vulnerable residents, when there is more impositions on those residents and they have more difficulty functioning in, you know, our community normally, that's when, you know, it's absolutely correct that we put that safety net in place. Andrew, I don't want to would love you to say what your views are on these things. I was going to say, because it's clearly a multi-agency approach, whether you're talking about Public Health England and Rainbow Service, but you need cross-party, I would say cross-party cooperation. So where, as leader of Harlow Conservatives, where does Councillor Andrew Johnson come in?
Yeah, absolutely, Michael. This is it's an international pandemic, and at times like that, party politics have to go out the window, and we've got to pull together all the talents across the council chamber to work together to try and provide community leadership and coordination. And I think that's what's happening at the moment. It's really important for the council to work effectively at this time, and not to be a blocker to anything, because the fast-paced situation at the moment, we know that new rules come out quite often in response to the moving R rate and to trying to keep communities safe. And at the same time, different support has come down the line from government, like the business grants and the council tax grants, that the council's been really quick at getting back out to the residents of the town. And I think that's really important. So for me, it's providing that sounding board to the administration, as I would normally do as an opposition member, but making sure we're joining the administration in community leadership and making sure we can get messages out quickly to the public and effectively, and making sure that the council's fit for purpose at the moment.
I was just going to say that I think at one of your COVID-19 committee last week, whatever, you talked about hoping this, you know, I guess the question for both of you is, could Harlow Council do with more powers? I'm not sure if it can be done overnight, but where there was a feeling that
cutting to the chase in certain scenarios, you know.
Very definitely. I mean, we know that 99.9% of both the people and the businesses in Harlow have been very respectful of the rules and respectful of each other, and trying to do their very best to keep the public health as good as possible. But we know there have been some incidences with some public houses and some other businesses, and I think, you know, there was a keenness on that meeting last week to take a zero tolerance approach to people who flout the rules repeatedly. Obviously, there's an education issue there. You've got to make people aware of the rules and not just go straight in with a heavy boot. But for people who persistently flout the rules, having the ability to enforce those rules would be really welcomed by the council, I think, by all sides.
And I believe that we are getting to sorry to interrupt, Michael, but I believe we are getting to a place where we are going to have greater enforcement capacity to ensure that we can not necessarily have to defer externally for that enforcement, but that we are coming to a point where we can, you know, we can bring about the enforcement that needs to happen, so that it can happen as quickly as possible, and as unequivocally as possible, because we're here on the scene. So that's a very important development, because you're right, that was one of the key things that we talked about in the meeting last week. And, you know, you would have seen there was cross-party agreement that we needed to have as much authority as we possibly can. And, you know, from what I understand, Essex County Council is not arguing with that point at all. It's just a question of how you bring these things about, these quite substantial changes, you know, how you make them happen and operationalise them.
Because this is a delicate balance, isn't it? We're not a military state, so therefore, if you're putting barriers up in the heart, you know, in Broadwalk, or markings in the Harvey Centre, you know. I mean, I was only recently, I've quarantined in Portugal. It was only 40 years ago they had a military state. So they said it's almost, people are fairly relaxed with things like that. But it's a hard balance with, you know, people in the Harvey Centre, people on Broadwalk, you know, it's difficult, isn't it?
Well, I mean, I guess it is, but I also think, you know, I'm a pragmatist. I don't think I'm a dictator, but I think it's pretty simple. We need to keep our distance. We need to put a mask on, and we need to wash our hands. I don't think it's, you know, and you know, I don't think that we can kind of have fines for people not doing that. I think that would be too far. But certainly, you know, we're at the Harvey Centre. We had reports 2 weeks ago that nobody was wearing a mask. There was, you know, very little evidence of any kind of social distancing, and we've seen that change over the last 2 weeks. You know, we've been in there monitoring it, and now, you know, there is infinitely more mask wearing and that kind of thing. We see it in the streets. So, you know, people are getting up to speed with it. But personally, I'm you know, wear a mask, wash your hands, don't go out. Do you need to hang out with people? It's not that complicated. I mean, as Andrew said, we're in a global pandemic. I mean, I shouldn't laugh because I don't want to undercut the seriousness of what I'm saying. But it is as serious as it can possibly be, and it's going to be in our lifetimes, and people are at real risk. And we want to keep our community here in Harlow safe. We want our residents, our businesses safe and prospering. And the best thing we can do for Harlow's recovery at the moment, in my opinion, is keep our people safe.
You echo that, Andrew?
Michael, it's now law around mask wearing in shops and in closed spaces like that. So I think, you know, we do need to encourage people, and it should be encouraged first of all before fine. It should be educate before putting the boot in, as I say. But, you know, as someone who works for the NHS and talks daily to people who are operational on the wards and things, you know, I can't stress enough how important it is to follow those rules, as Eugenie said, around the hands, face and space. You know, and we wouldn't be doing this as a local council, and indeed the government wouldn't be doing it just for the sheer hell of it. We want to make sure our NHS isn't overwhelmed and is there to treat everybody. We know that there are large sections of the community that are extremely vulnerable to this virus, whether it's because of their underlying ethnicity. We've seen disproportionate effects of this virus on the black and ethnic minority groups in the town, or whether it's from people who suffer from an underlying health concern. And here I have to say, you know, I've made it public knowledge I've had a kidney transplant, so I'm one of the top people that's at risk. But, you know, I've got family members that have got diabetes or heart problems, and I'm sure we all have someone in our lives and in our families that have got those problems, and we don't want that person to get ill. And so that's why we just need to keep stressing the rules to people and keep making sure that people do follow those rules.
But it's also, I guess, getting the balance right. You want to encourage, you know, people also get out in the fresh air if you can. throughout this next 6 months, whether I've just been down to the interview at the rugby club, or, they have a give it a try on Saturday morning, or and also, wasn't it very encouraging? Sorry, Andrew, I know you were shielding, but, during April and May, see so many Harlow people walking around, and, so it's important to get the balance about this is resilience, but it's not, if you can keep up a healthy lifestyle, please do.
Absolutely. I completely agree. And sorry, Andrew.
No, carry on.
Well, I think we do these public health things, but also get a flu jab if you need one. Get out, keep fit, eat a good diet. Be in the fresh air. Think about your mental health. I mean, I've been saying to my colleagues in my work, this is a sprint, not a race. Which is what
a marathon, not a sprint.
Marathon. You're the runner, Mark. Anyway, I mean the one where you have to pace yourself. Okay, so we've got to pace ourselves. Look after your mental health. Look after your physical health. Stay in touch with people. Don't panic. Try and stay calm. This is going to be, I hate to say it, a sustained period of time, and you can interpret that as you want, but it's not something that's going to be gone overnight, and we need to be personally and collectively prepared for that.
That you're going to get people. Sorry, Andrew.
I was going to say, I think looking after both physical and mental health is really important to stress to people at the moment. And whether that's taking some extra steps by going for an extra walk a week than you normally would, taking the dog out for a walk if you've got one, which, both you, Janie, and I think you have, or if it's about, making time to use online portals like Zoom or FaceTime or whatever to chat with your friends, give them a call, check in on them, see if they're okay, because your mental health is just as good as your physical health. But one thing that I've been really pleased to see is nationally the levels of smoking has gone down in the last 6 months. More people are trying to quit. And I think, when you've got a respiratory virus out there, people are obviously thinking with one mind to, oh, well, actually, it would be healthier. But it's all those little improvements that we can make in our lives, reducing the amount of sugar that you're eating as well, because we know that diabetes is one of the things that this virus latches onto. So just anything you can do at the moment to live a healthier life, yeah, excellent. And if there's any way we can help publicise those things, we'll keep doing it.
Eugenia, is there anything you want to add here? We're covering, I mean, one of the issues I think we talked about linked to is mental health, isn't it? And it is important.
Yes, I think, thinking about things we can do, I think it's really important that we keep an eye out for our neighbours. And a lot of people do this already, but I think we can all make a little bit more of an effort perhaps at the moment. People who we don't see about, perhaps just keeping an eye, making sure that I've got a neighbour who lives on his own, and it suddenly occurred to me I hadn't seen him, and I went up and had a look, said hello, and he said, I haven't spoken to someone for 4 days. And it's just, that's the reality. Life has become a lot smaller, and I think if we can just have an eye on or an ear on the world at large and just think, who might be suffering? Who do I know? Who haven't I heard from? That's a really positive thing.
What's really wonderful about Harlow is that community spirit really does exist in a way that it doesn't exist in other towns and in other areas. And I think we saw that during the start of the lockdown, when people were checking on their neighbours and sharing food. And I live in an area in Church Langley where there's some very active Facebook groups around, not just Church Langley, but the individual estates have their own Facebook groups, and it's lovely to see people checking up on each other there, sharing material, sharing ideas. And I think if we can get that rolled out across the whole town, and I think it is in a large town, going, that's the lifeblood of Harlow, isn't it? Our community.
Yes, I think was it Colport Close, and they were having a clean up, etc. And in many ways, is that the responsibility of all now 36 councillors to really be embedded in each of their wards over the next 6 months and do what they can? Is that an opportunity?
I think it is. It is difficult because we have got social distancing. It is more difficult for us to interact, and I'm very conscious that we must respect people. I think people have different sensitivities and different, so it's more difficult for us to have a sort of person-to-person role. But I'm very pleased. I've just seen a draft today of the Harlow Times. It's going to come out at the end of October. Andrew, I must share it with you to see what you think. But it's really full of community agencies and support groups you can talk to, things we're trying to do with business, things you can do for yourself. And one of the things that we are really trying to encourage is people shopping locally. We've got a big spotlight on the shops that are in your local areas. So actually, you can probably do quite a lot of your shopping a little bit more locally than you might think. you might choose to spend a bit more money locally rather than on Amazon, and then you're supporting local businesses. You're keeping the Harlow Pound in Harlow. You're keeping a child in, you know, dance lessons or something like that. So I think, you know, it is more difficult for us as ward councillors to be out and about and as visible as we like to be. But I hope that through, well, interviews like this and through the Harlow Times and hopefully through social media, which most of us are active on, mindful, of course, that lots of people don't have access to it, but we're all doing our best. And, you know, we have phones. Most of us have phones, and you know, I get calls from residents and I welcome that. And, you know, certainly it is not the time for us to be disappearing. We are very much at the coalface of the community response, and I would encourage people to look up, when they get their Harlow Times, it always has a list of the councillors. Ring yours up if you've got a problem or you're anxious, and ask them for your help. That's what we're here for.
And have you increased the volume of the Harlow? I mean, as we said, there are lots of people who don't have social media, who don't have mobile phones. I know your Harlow 4 million page views this year, but there's lots of people who do miss a physical paper. So have you deliberately beefed up the Harlow Times in respect of that in this image just now?
We haven't put extra pages in. We did look at that. But we actually found that we could move things around to have in such a way. And I mean, it is crammed. It's really crammed, and it's just very information heavy. And you know, I hope that people will really read it this time in a way that they may not have in the past. But I think your point about a local paper, we are so, you know, this is one of those times when you just say, this is when we need a local newspaper. You know, it's just a crying shame that people aren't able to get regular news through their door the way they used to only a few years ago.
Just wondering, those any, you know, we mentioned a lot of things here. Is it just anything else anything that comes to mind, almost like a miscellaneous issues that you like? Any other business? I think that's what you guys say, isn't it? Anything else you want?
No, I don't know if you've been notified of anything, Michael. So unless you've been notified, no. Andrew, sorry, do you have anything to say?
Yeah, I think we need to remember, Michael, that, you know, between the council and the government working together, you know, we're still doing things, you know, flowing that money, things like that both you, Danny, and I have welcomed, the Rough Sleeper initiative, you know, the money to flow to councils to make sure people weren't sleeping rough on the streets and to continue not sleeping rough on the streets. So I think all of our councillors across the town are very involved in their local communities. They welcome people getting in contact with them, and they recognise now that things are a bit different. We're operating a bit differently, you know, and they still welcome letters and things through the door and phone calls, but they are adapting to dealing with more and more people online. And I think that's actually the way the country's going to go post-COVID as well. I think, you know, although it's been an appalling time, and although it's been absolutely tragic with deaths and illnesses, I do think the working world has changed, and we're now going to be much more online. More and more people have got themselves IT literate during the last 6 months, and I think that can only benefit people as they upskill themselves in that way.
Can I just add about, I think it's probably one of the most important aspects, and I'm leaving it to the end, but it's one of the big issues, though. All that we've said, all you've both said, is all the, is it 13,000 people in Harlow on furlough? That's a
16,000 people protected by the furlough scheme, and a further 5,000 self-employed supported by the self-employed scheme. So that's a total of 21,000 residents.
That's a lot of people, isn't it?
A lot of people.
Third, isn't it? So, I mean, it's huge. And I think, you know, you're right. And we've come to it at the end, but it is really probably the greatest concern that we are facing at the moment is the experience of people who are very likely, once their furlough ends, to be made redundant. We have a higher than average concentration of hospitality and retail sector employees in our town, and those sectors are predicted to be particularly badly hit. I mean, we can see that already. So we really are going to have, you know, some very great challenges on our hands as we come up to Christmas, I think, with employment and unemployment and young people. And so I think that's a great concern. We are, you know, looking at, for example, how we can really turbocharge, for example, the government's apprentice scheme. You know, how do we get the take up of that by local businesses? You know, how do we maximise that? How does the council support local businesses to take that on and promote that? You know, if we can really energise, you know, those sorts of schemes, I mean, I think we absolutely have to. So that's the kind of support that I'm really determined that we sort of, you know, really gear up to, because you're absolutely right that it's you know, that is the cliff that I think we're all quite fearful that we're going to fall off in the next
Michael,
6-8 weeks.
Whilst there's, you know, and I don't want to say it's just the media putting bad news out there, but there has been a lot of good news for businesses in Harlow. When you think of both the bounce back loans and the CBIL scheme, with about £85 million flowing into businesses in this town, over 2,000 businesses just from those two schemes. And as I said at the start, that £12 million worth of grants that the council got out in record time at the start that came from government. So, and that's really the other reason why people need to pay attention to the rules that we've got at the moment about the masks and the hands.
Absolutely.
And the distancing. Because the last thing any of us wants, politicians from both sides of the chamber, would be to have a total lockdown of the town, which shut hospitality venues and all the rest of it. But the way we can stop that from happening is to keep that R rate low in the town. And we do that by following the rules and helping to enforce the rules. So there is a degree that the people of Harlow and the businesses of Harlow can really help themselves here by making sure that they're following the rules as well, so that we can keep them open.
I think that's the key point, and almost a brilliant place to come back to, because it started with, you know, people and individual response, and just, you know, come on, it's not too much to ask, hands, face, space. And, you know, we come around to employment, and the truth is, yes, if we can avoid a lockdown, we will save our businesses. We'll shore up the investment the government made in a lot of businesses that won't have gone to waste. We'll keep jobs, you know, and our town stands better for the future. So it does start with us putting on a mask, washing our hands and keeping our distance and respecting the rules. And if you do that, that is the best thing you can do for Harlow. And that, I guess, is the point that Andrew and I really wanted to say, let's do this together. This is, you know, we've all got to come together to keep our town safe and secure and prosperous.
Jenny, thank you very much. Andrew, thank you very much. I don't think there's anything else to add.
Thank you, Michael.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for having us.
Okay.